All right, good afternoon. Today we're going to cover cellular respiration. I'm going to show you a PowerPoint, and what you guys are going to do is follow along with the guided notes or the cellular respiration handout that I have underneath the classwork tab on your Google Classroom. Again, just like photosynthesis, this is going to be extremely simplified. So please realize there is more to this, but I'm going to give you the big picture today. Hopefully by now you have photosynthesis already down, or kind of at least, because you're going to see a lot of similarities. What you're going to learn here soon is that we're going to need to use the products of photosynthesis to get us started for cellular respiration. So the overall goal of cellular respiration is to convert the chemical energy that's found in food. And remember, you can use any of the macromolecules of food, so carbohydrates, lipids, or proteins for energy. But carbohydrates are always the first one that we use for energy. So today during our equation, we're going to look at glucose, which is the main component or the monomer of our carbohydrates. And we're going to use this glucose, which is this chemical energy, and we're going to look at how ATP or stored energy is created. So here is the chemical equation. You will see the glucose molecule is the C6H12O6. So when you take the glucose, which is found inside your food, and you take in oxygen that you breathe, you get at the end, you have water as a product, carbon dioxide, which you exhale, and then you create energy or ATP, which is the whole goal of cellular respiration. Remember, the goal of photosynthesis was to create glucose. The goal of cellular respiration is to create that cellular energy that's in the form of ATP. Hopefully on the last slide, you realized that this equation looks very similar. If you are looking, you will see that this equation is the opposite of photosynthesis. Okay, here you have energy as a product, but in photosynthesis, that energy was the light. And then if you remember in photosynthesis, you had to add water and carbon dioxide, and as products of photosynthesis, you got oxygen and glucose. Well, with cellular respiration, you just flip the equation. So if you learn the equation of photosynthesis, you already know the equation for cellular respiration. The reactants are what is before the arrow. So the reactants in cellular respiration is glucose and oxygen. And the products of cellular respiration is carbon dioxide, which is a waste product, we exhale it, and then water, and then of course, our energy, which is our goal, okay? Note that the energy released in the form of ATP from this process, but sometimes it's not considered a full product, okay? So here's the mitochondria. We've talked about that when we talked about our cell organelles. And in the mitochondria is where this process of cellular respiration is occurring, okay? Cellular respiration takes place in the mitochondria and has two main parts. There is the inner membrane in purple, and those are just folded membranes. And then the matrix is in that lime green. That's the fluid-like substance that's going to fill up the space. So when we talk about the two main parts, you will see that there are different locations, just like photosynthesis, that these different steps are occurring in. So the first stage in cellular respiration is called glycolysis. And during glycolysis, this is where you're going to break down that glucose, which is the first reactant or first ingredient in your equation. And in glycolysis, the purpose is to break down that glucose, and they do that by splitting the 6-carbon molecule. And I want to go back and show you. If you're looking, glucose is in that blue box. You will see that glucose is a 6-carbon molecule, okay? So in glycolysis, what we are doing is we are splitting that 6-carbon molecule, and we're going to split it in half so that you get 2 3-carbon molecules. When you take your 6-carbon glucose molecule and you split it in half, you get the 3 carbon molecule, but it's no longer called glucose. It is now called a pyruvate. This is all going to occur in the cytoplasm of your cell. It's going to require 0 oxygen. So that means we're going to call it anaerobic. Anytime you have a biological process and it doesn't require oxygen, it's going to be an anaerobic process. And I'm sorry about that yellow font, but at the end of this part of glycolysis, you are going to produce 2 ATP. Remember, ATP is your cellular energy, and you're going to create 2 NADH. Okay. We are going to talk more about, is that a lot? Is that a little later on? So just remember 2 ATP in glycolysis, and you also make 2 NADHs as well. So after glycolysis, the cell must make a decision, okay? If there is oxygen present, then the cell is going to go through a 2-step process known as aerobic respiration in order to obtain that energy. Aerobic respiration, of course, is going to have oxygen, and it's also going to produce more ATP, which is why if there's oxygen available, that is the route the cell is going to take. If oxygen is not present, then the cell will go through the process of anaerobic respiration, which is also known as fermentation, okay? And this one will not produce as much ATP, but it'll still produce a little bit, so it's better than nothing. So glycolysis, if O2 is present, aerobic. If O2 is not present, anaerobic. So we're going to look at the route when oxygen is available. Again, we're going to simplify this. There's a lot more to this, of course. We're going to call the very first stage of aerobic respiration. It is called the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle. This is going to be happening in the mitochondrial matrix. So that is going to be all that lime green space that was in your mitochondria. That's that fluid-like substance. And what's happening during the citric acid cycle is that those 2 pyruvate molecules that you created from glycolysis, those are going to be chemically converted in order to make 2 ATP and also some NADH and FADH2. Okay, it's okay to not completely understand what NADH and FADH2 is. There are other forms of energy that are going to be used differently throughout the cell. What I want you guys to focus on is the ATP. Okay, so yes, it's going to produce some other types of energies, but we're going to narrow in on ATP only. Okay, and so during this first stage, it's going to create an additional 2 ATP. So you created 2 ATP during the glycolysis step. Now that we have oxygen available, we are going down the aerobic respiration route. And in the very first stage, you've created another 2 ATP. As a waste product, you're also going to release carbon dioxide, which you as humans are going to exhale. The other step of aerobic respiration is called the electron transport chain, okay? We also saw the electron transport chain in photosynthesis, okay? The location of this is going to be the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So that was that purple space you saw in your diagram. And this is going to be a series of reactions that are going to be using electrons and hydrogens that are formed during the Krebs cycle. So we are simplifying this. So you do create some hydrogens and electrons during that first stage, and you're going to use those in this stage in a series of reactions. And while you are doing that, you are going to make an additional 34 ATP. Okay, you're also going to make water, okay, because you're going to have those hydrogen ions that are in the electron transport chain bonding to that oxygen that you are breathing in. Because remember, this is the aerobic respiration route, so you are going to have oxygen available. So you can see that you create the most ATP during this stage, the electron transport chain. So think about it. What similarities are there between photosynthesis and cellular respiration? Okay, we pointed out some similarities and differences within the equation. I tried to show you some also during the PowerPoint slide. So I want you to think about that. I'm going to show you a table later that you guys are going to fill out, and then we'll go back and look at those answers. Okay. There's one more route that you can take if oxygen is not available, and that is called the anaerobic respiration. So in the absence of oxygen, a cell will go through anaerobic respiration. It's also called fermentation, okay? And there are two main types of fermentation. There's lactic acid fermentation and alcohol fermentation. So lactic acid, you guys have all experienced this. After maybe you've played a football game or you've worked out for a long time and you start to feel that pain in your muscle, that's actually the overproduction of lactic acid that you're feeling. And that's because you have worked your muscles so much that they have had to go through fermentation because you worked them at an extreme rate where they couldn't get enough oxygen to keep up with how much cellular respiration they had to happen. So you eventually went into fermentation. Alcohol fermentation is, again, how wine is fermented, beer and yeast. And I'm sure you guys have heard of that before as well. And it looks like there's a slide for lactic acid. I jumped ahead, but this is going to occur in some bacteria and animal cells like your muscles. Pyruvate from the glycolysis step is going to be converted into lactic acid to make another 2 ATP. So total, you make 4. You make 2 in glycolysis, and then you get 2 more when you convert that pyruvate, which is your 3-carbon molecule, into lactic acid. So you only make 4 in this step, much less compared to that electron transport chain, that aerobic respiration route, which is why your body will always choose aerobic respiration if there is oxygen available. Alcohol fermentation is going to occur in yeast. This is when oxygen is not available. So pyruvates from the glycolysis step is going to be broken down into either alcohol, carbon dioxide, and it's also going to make 2 ATP just like your lactic acid. And so depending on if you're an animal, plants can also go through alcohol fermentation. So if you're a plant or a yeast, you're going to take this alcohol fermentation. If you're a bacteria or animal cell, you will go through the lactic acid one. So let's look at our total ATP, because remember, we don't care about the other energy. We wanted to focus in on the ATP. So if oxygen's available and you go through your aerobic respiration, you're going to make a total of 36 to 38 ATP. Now, these aren't always perfect numbers, okay? But on average, this is what your body is producing. So you're going to get 2 ATP from glycolysis, 2 ATP from the Krebs cycle, and then 34 from the electron transport chain. So if you add that up, you can get a total of 38 from aerobic respiration alone. When you go through anaerobic respiration, you can only make 2 to 4, okay? You're going to make 2 from glycolysis and 2 from either fermentation. Whether you're an animal, you'll go to lactic acid fermentation. If you're a yeast, for example, you'll go to the alcohol fermentation. So 38 versus 4, you can see, is a huge difference. So here is photosynthesis and cellular respiration. I really want you guys to focus on the similarities and differences. So you will do an exercise later where you're going to compare and contrast them. This is just a diagram showing you the equations. And what I want you to notice is that the reactants and photosynthesis are the products in cellular respiration. The product in cellular respiration is the reactants in cellular respiration. So I think I worded that wrong. Hold on. The reactants in photosynthesis are the products in cellular respiration. The products in photosynthesis are the reactants in cellular respiration. There we go. I think I said it backwards last time. Sorry about that. All right. And so what I want you guys to do is finish filling up that handout and then go ahead and upload that to Google Classroom, and we will talk about this later. Thank you.